Hey, welcome. My name is Daniel, and this is Metal Sharpens Metal, the place where we analyze heavy music from a Christian worldview. And if I could be honest with you guys, I have been kind of dreading doing this song for a while. I considered doing it last year, but I never got around to it, kept putting it off. It's a very emotional song for me, and for a lot of people, I think the meaning is very emotional. You'll understand that when we get there into the lyrics, but today, the song is Future Bird by a band named VOLA. They are really good. The song is amazing, but it's so heavy. When I first heard it, this is the lyric video, so I just like stopped what I was doing and I started reading through the lyrics, and I was kind of blown away. So I'm going to walk you guys through that, and yeah, again, you may not resonate with this the way I do, but yeah, it's a really good one, a really powerful one. So we'll see what you guys think. Let's go jump in. And the song starts off with just a wall of sound all at once. All right. Pay attention to that synth line. I really like that bass tone. That piano sounds like it's off time. Now there's just a little more guitar coming in. It's so well written. The bass is growly, but it's not like gritty. It's such a good balance. And the verses are so light and airy in a lot of ways, but the choruses are just heavy. They're actually heavy.
Dream of cellophane, wake up in ball and chain for a day more.
Guitars right here. You may notice that the accents seem to be a little bit off, and we'll talk about that later too. And there's the meaning of the song in case you missed it. That tone on the synth kind of sounds like a lullaby. So yeah, you probably understand now why that was such a difficult song. You know, you hear these stories a lot. I feel like these stories come up a lot in our lives and it doesn't cause us, you know, much emotion. But when it's set to music, for me, it makes the feelings just that much more powerful. You know, like the guitar, the melody choices, the way that the instruments are phased in, the way that they impact you, that can really accentuate the meaning. And they did a great job of writing it all in a way that that ties it together super well. So that's a sad song. I would be, if it were me, especially if I was like telling my story through that song and trying to sing that live, I would be, I don't know if I'd be able to do it. I think that's why I'm very tied to these songs about family, because you know, I love my family so much that when it's set to music, things that get stuck in your head and things that make it more memorable, it just raises the importance and increases the gravity of the situation. So yeah, music is a special thing for sure. So just to kind of talk about the band for a second, VOLA, I thought I saw somewhere that VOLA meant flight or something relating to birds. And birds are definitely their kind of mascot for the band. They're in a lot of their merch and stuff. And it comes into play here for the song Future Bird, obviously. So their singer and lead guitarist is named Asger Mygend. I think it's Mygend. And I know I say it a lot with a lot of these guys, but I love his voice. I think he's got a really good kind of airy, like angelic, higher register that goes well over the heavy guitars. They've got some actually really heavy guitars in some of their songs that does not sound like it would go with like singing and kind of more on like the rock side instead of metal. But I think they complement the voice perfectly. There's a similar effect with like Tesseract. They've got some of the heaviest crushing instrumentals, and then they always have really good crystal clear singing over the top of it, whether it's Dan or Ash. So yeah, that I like that effect a lot. And you can tell that he's trained really well. He's not just like trying to belt it, go for the highest notes possible. He's just a good singer, and he's a good melody writer. The fact that he can do guitar as well, I've said in other videos, I think that makes you a better musician as a whole and write better songs. So yeah, it's great. And if I could kind of describe like the shape of his voice, this kind of came to me the other day, but it feels like it's something that can be really wide and stretchy, if that makes sense, like Play-Doh almost, not Play-Doh, silly putty, something kind of stretchy. It can change its shape at will in really cool ways. And it also sounds at times like he's underwater. There were a couple parts in that song where the way he pronounced a word, like delicately kind of hitting the consonants and stuff, he kind of sounded, there was like a little bit of wateriness to it. It's very cool. So yeah, I really like his clear, unique tone, and he writes some epic melodies as well. Really enjoy those. So yeah, let's just jump into the meaning. You may have gathered it. This song was about losing a young child, and it's sung from the perspective of the mother. You know, it seemed like she was all ready to welcome the baby to his room, and you know, he had toys ready and picked out and stuff, but they never got to bring the child home from the hospital. This one is just, it's so powerful and tragically written that I think these guys are probably musical geniuses. For example, the intro, which was the chorus, it had that organ sound on the synth that just kind of reminds me of a funeral, honestly. Even though they were kind of some ascending notes, it felt very sad. It didn't lift my spirits at all. It sounded like it was, you know, reminding us of death. And a second example I thought of was Asger's genius in how he wrote the lyrics to say something so clearly, but he didn't use any like flat kind of two-dimensional phrases or words. Like he didn't just come out and say things blatantly and bluntly. There was a lot of tact and poetry in how it was written, and written from kind of like a, I don't know if stream of consciousness would be the right term, but just kind of as the mother like looks at these things that should be very normal, innocuous things, they all of a sudden have have a very different meaning to her. So yeah, it ends up that each line is kind of loaded with a ton of meaning, and some of it's a little bit cryptic. I'll do my best to take guesses on some of them, but I'm not entirely sure what it's all referencing. So let's take a look at some of these. So the first clue that we have that this is about something very tragic is your eyes are in a feud, like they're like fighting with the world, kind of trying not to cry. But this is a culturally approved indiscretion, so it's expected that you would be crying when you're in a situation like this. And again, vapor in your face, like tears, I think. It has this line, calling out a name, the one you would have framed had he been there, had he been here. So whoever he was that is missing, he's not here, and they would have framed this name. I mean, I think that's pretty clearly describing a child's nursery. You know, you would normally put the name up there. And then it goes into the chorus, and we see that name is Damian. So let's jump down and see some of these lines that I thought were kind of interesting, but I wasn't totally sure about. So it goes from, you know, a polyester bear would greet him in his lair on the 3rd floor. So, you know, in his bedroom, he would have had a polyester teddy bear. And now it talks about, we dream of cellophane, wake up in ball and chain for a day more. This was a kind of confusing line for me. The cellophane brings to mind either maybe like the plastic clear coating on the outside of a kid's toy, you know, when it's in the wrapper still, or I thought of the plastic wrap that goes around a bouquet of flowers that somebody would give to a mother who is grieving. You know, you wake up in ball and chain, and maybe that's just, you know, you're exhausted from all the grieving, and it feels like you're trapped, you're imprisoned. Although I think there's another potential meaning here. The song being called Future Bird, it kind of sounds like the idea that people have of, you know, when we die, we become these kind of angelic beings. We get wings. We're kind of up in heaven like that. I think this is just kind of a very generalized view that a lot of people have. So if Damian is this future bird, if he's the one who died and, you know, became an angel in heaven, then the mother, in contrast, would feel like she's waking up in a ball and chain. She's imprisoned to the earth. She's tethered here to this life, and you know, there's no getting away from that until she's in heaven one day too. And you know, going back to the chorus, it says that all I ever wanted was control. And if this is from the mother's point of view, you could see why she would want to control this situation, because to lose your child and to feel like you have no control over their life, no potential to protect them or to raise them and nurture them. You know, it sounds kind of selfish and almost domineering to say, I want control, like I need control over this. But when you're being honest with yourself, I think that it's because we feel this responsibility to bring up our children well, to keep them safe. Yeah, I totally get it. You need to let your children have their experiences. You need to let them live their own lives. You need to let them grow up into their own selves. But you still have this desire to help whenever your child is hurt, and to, you know, reach out and comfort them whenever they're sad. So yeah, this desire for control is totally natural. It's not a surprise, I don't think. And even if you don't believe that we have souls, or that we are eternal beings, we have, you know, these souls that can never die. You know, in the Christian belief, we have souls that will never cease. They will go on forever. But have you ever kind of thought how insane that is, that we get to have these kids and then interact with these new souls that have never existed before, will never exist again, and we get to interact with them through their lives. They are distinct individuals. I mean, a lot of this is going to sound obvious and kind of like, why are you talking about this? But it's just kind of a mind-blowing concept to see that God gives us these gifts. And, you know, we think of sometimes having kids as this casual thing, like, oh yeah, you know, got a couple kids, it's whatever, they annoy me sometimes, but I love them, I guess. Like, but when you really stop and think about it, it's like God gave you this gift. He wasn't compelled to, like, he didn't have to do things this way. We could have just popped out of the ground and not been connected to each other at all, and just like existed as this totally individualistic race that never interacts with other people. But that's not how God made it. So it should be very sobering to realize exactly what God has entrusted us with. And then for this final kind of bridge outro section, he says, the ravens are out tonight, playful and wild, which sounds kind of unrelated to this next part. A mother has lost a light surrounding a child. So, you know, the child has a form of like light around them, like they bring joy to your world, and they're just generally like these curious, cute, awesome creatures, but she has lost her light. And so I wondered if the ravens were a metaphor for death. You know, ravens kind of point to death and dark things, dark tidings in certain stories, just the sense of loss, obviously, that the mother is feeling. And also, you know, pointing to the concept of the future bird that the mother says that she will meet again one day, at least she hopes to, right? It says, let all the fallen rise and fingers stabilize till we all meet. And that's really interesting because, you know, and again, in Christianity, there is a concept of resurrection. There is a resurrection of all the dead, and then comes our final judgment. But the resurrection that is promised to believers is said to be of a new kind of body. It's an imperishable body. It'll never die again. Jesus has this body right now. He has been the first fruit resurrected from the dead in this way. And if all the fallen rise, if we come back from our graves, fingers can stabilize. It's like, I don't know if that's like tapping fingers, like just kind of nervousness and you know, anxiety thinking about losing your son. So yeah, I want to talk for a second about how I think the musical side complements these lyrics perfectly. This might get a little bit like interpretive and subjective to my thoughts, but I think I can make a pretty strong case that it actually is genius, is brilliantly written. So let's talk about time signatures for a second. Time signatures are when you count to a song based on the tempo, and you count out how many times you, like whatever that number is that you count out is the top number of the time signature. All right, we don't have to get super technical about it, but at the beginning, it's written in 7/4. So it's got that big riff with the organ behind it that I said, and it says, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So it goes through 3 measures of that 7/4 and then does 1 measure of the 8/4. And I said 8/4 because, you know, normally you would just call that 4/4. That's like what 90% of the music that you listen to is in, probably. But I said 8/4 because if you have 3 of 7 and then 1 of 8, you know, whether it was intentional or not, I think it's a really unique way of expressing that something is missing. So it feels natural to us to count to 4 or 8 before you repeat again. That would feel normal. That's how you headbang. The fact that they only do that once and then the rest of the time they only count to 7 makes you feel like something isn't right. It gives a feeling, like a lingering feeling that something is incomplete. And that would be exactly how a family would feel after losing a child this young. And so I'll get artsy about the ending as well, that bridge where the counts are a count of 7 and a count of 9 repeating. So one measure has too few notes, 7, and then the other measure has too many notes, 9. So they both add to 16, which is, you know, 2 8s, but the interpretive weirdness in me sees that as like making an attempt at wholeness. You're making an attempt to count to 16, but you're doing it in 7 and 9 instead of 8 and 8, which would feel more natural. So it's not normal to count that way, but it's also not normal to lose a child. It adds up correctly in the end, like when it's summed up, and maybe that's pointing to the future aspect that they said when we meet again. You know, they're feeling like there's going to be some sense of completeness and wholeness at the end when they meet again. So I think those time signatures work really well. They paint a picture, at least in my mind, of how this family would be feeling. So by the time this video releases, almost 2 years ago to the day, we lost a child in the womb. And that's a big reason why this has been really hard for me to want to go over. I knew about this song before we lost our child. So every time I went back to it after that, I was just torn up, extra special. You know, it was a very fresh wound each time. And I know that, you know, a lot of people have gone through this same event and had the loss at later stages. And I'm sure that likely caused more grief for those people. I can't imagine, you know, having to go through that part. But for us, there was a sense of incompleteness and a sense of loss that we couldn't fully face. We couldn't fully understand. You know, we hadn't named this child yet, so we were just basically made aware with the pregnancy test. We had a few days of considering, like, okay, how's our life changing? And then we were rushing to the hospital a few days after that. So it's really hard to wrap your mind around and make sense of all of that when it happens so fast. For me, it was, you know, definitely saddening. Like, this was my little boy or girl that I lost, and that's not exciting to think about. But for my wife, who was literally attached to this little person, she was very shaken. It's still very hard for me to talk about, knowing that my wife will listen to this video and it'll bring up all the talks and the tears that we've had since November of 2022. But we, despite my emotions here, we do not grieve as a family who doesn't have hope. As Christians, we understand, why there is sin in the world, why there's brokenness, and what's going wrong in our world. And we also understand the final plan for that, the solution that God has put in place to sum up all things under his glory. And he's going to do that through Christ one day. Obviously, I would love to be reunited as an entire family on the new earth one day, and see that baby, meet him face to face, or her. But even if that doesn't happen, we will still praise the Lord, because he has given us so much, and so much more than we deserve, so much more than we imagine possible. There are two verses that come to mind when I'm thinking about these things that give me comfort. One is that God will work all things together for good for those who love him. And this all is summed up for his purposes, it says in Romans 8:28. And these are purposes that we will not fully understand in this life. There's going to be certain things that escape our understanding and our knowledge. I hope that we can learn about that. We can spend all of eternity learning about that and understanding God's purposes when we meet him face to face. But we are not guaranteed that in this life. The second verse I hold on to is Genesis 18:25, which says, "The judge of all the earth will do right. Not a single hair falls from our heads without God knowing, and he will do right in all things." So thank you for listening to that rough song with me, and thank you for hearing out my story as well. If this subject matter doesn't affect you personally, consider yourself blessed. I know a lot of people are affected by miscarriage and loss of young ones, and rarely speak about it because look at how difficult it is. So just know that I am here with you. But I also want to point us both to the God who gives us reasons to go through this grief with a purpose. He will sum it up for his purposes in the end. Even if we don't understand it, he will do right. So we can go through this grief as those who actually do have hope. And for anyone who doesn't know Christ, I pray that he will cause you to be born again by his mighty hand, and that he would bring you from death into life, adopted into an eternal family that will never die again. That is my goal. That is the hope that I have to look forward to as a Christian. So yeah, thanks again. I hope to see you in the next one, and bye.